All right, as you saw me walking into Justin's house, that's how you know he's rich, when he's got a yard crew coming and does his leaves for him. Either way, I came by to start this video off kind of at his shop. Picked up my stuff from PowerCo. I got the swing arm, the headlight bucket, and the hand controls all done as you saw. And then we just pushed in the BareKnuckles. I think that's their 3.0. Yeah. So that's their 3.0 kit.
He's just waiting on the frame to get done from PowerCo.
It's not happening.
You're right there.
But it looks so good. That swing arm, when I saw it, I was even telling, I was like, man, that swing arm looks so good. Anyways, I'm gonna get these parts home. We're gonna go have lunch real quick. I'm gonna get these parts back to the house, and then I'm going to try to get the swing arm and the transmission in maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. And of course, you saw Justin's actually busy as hell. So, real quick, we have, like I said in the last video, we're gonna do a big giveaway, and I think it's one of the bigger giveaways that doesn't involve a purchase.
Yeah.
No purchase necessary. So for a 1 year, coming up in the next, I think it's like another, maybe 30 days. Yeah, something towards the end of January. Figure out the exact logistics of like what he wants to give away, but it's not going to be, I think last time it was like a $250, something that within that $200 range.
Yeah, I was going to do like triple tree and riser combo or riser and gauge combo. It's going to be hard to kind of like pinpoint what you have, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. So stay tuned for that. Appreciate you guys following along. I'm gonna get this parts home, and then we'll pick up there. So later. All right, we're back in the garage. Kind of apologize on all the noise from the last video or from the start of this video. Obviously, it was very noisy over there at the Page Estate with all the crew and everything blowing the leaves around. As you see, we got the swing arm here. Bearings are in. Got the blocks. I got my rear axle. This is the pivot shaft. Got it all nice and cleaned up. Obviously the pivot blocks. And what I wanted to start this video, or this portion of the video off talking about, is shocks. So a lot of the guys are running these shocks, and there was something that we noticed upon doing Justin's bike, and I'll show you real quick what's going on. All right, so I picked up a set of these Bitubo, I think that's how you say it, Bitubo. Basically the same shock that Justin's running on his MA FXR. And apparently the same shock that a lot of you guys are running on a lot of your bikes. When we were doing Justin's bike, there's one thing that we noticed, and that was if you were to bolt the shock in to either one of these spots with the supplied little spacer that it comes with, depending on where you have it bolted in at, when you went to go move it, it would just stay and stay. It didn't have free range of motion like a Legends or Olin's. Reason being is, I don't know if you can kind of see it there, but this has like a pressed in bushing. And with this counter sleeve, none of this stuff is meant to move. It's merely meant to kind of absorb the shock or kind of vibrations or whatever, but it's permanently pressed in. Same reason that we removed the rear swing arm bushings is it acts as like a bind, if that makes sense. And the reason it does that is that the way that this thing's manufactured, and I don't know if you can tell there, but this inner sleeve is actually just a smidget too long when you put two bushings together. So I'm gonna show you real quick, try to explain this the best way that I can. No matter, I've measured all these bushings, no matter how you measure them. The inside, see if we can get you on camera. The inside clearance, 2150. So we'll say 2150 millimeters, whatever you wanna say. The actual thickness of said spacer, no matter where you measure, if I measure up here at the tip, 2236, do it fully across, 2243-ish, about almost a millimeter difference, I would say. It's kind of counterproductive if you put the bearings in the swing arm to free up the swing arm so it has good motion, but yet your shocks are binding. So what I've done is I have actually taken a file and merely filed down carefully. You can put some tape around here and file just this sleeve on both sides evenly to where, let's show you here. You know what I mean? You see, I don't know if you can see the little bit of sleeve that sticks out on both ends. And then this side has been shaved down and you don't really see a lot of it. So when you put a pair of bushings down here and you get the bushings to touch, can you hear a little bit of play, a little bit of movement? There's no movement in the shock, everything moves freely. But when you do it up here at the top that I have yet to cut down, no movement, no whatever. And granted, I can feel it grinding. I know you probably can't feel it, but I can feel resistance. Obviously, a bolt nut torqued down properly is gonna put more resistance on it, but I can put resistance in there to make it a little tougher to actually spin. So I'll show you real quick. I'm just gonna file this down a little bit, take a couple more measurements, and we'll try to get this measurement to meet this measurement and be able to put these on the bike. So like I said, all I do is I just take the file and just gently, this metal is actually pretty thin. if you're putting a bike together brand new, it doesn't hurt to take a few minutes to kind of do this. Backside. Now we're going to take a quick measurement, just kind of see where we're at. I feel like we still got to go more, but we are 2176, so we've taken about a half off now. 2165. So we've gone about half the distance. So back to the one side. Do another measurement real quick. 2129, 2127. Not perfectly squared up, but once we get the bushings in here, we should hear a little bit of play. Yeah, there you go. Might be a little hard to pick it up on the camera, but it's got a little side-to-side action in there again, but you can almost see it if you look really close. So that tells you right there that when you go to torque this down, you're torquing these two pieces against each other and not these pieces against the actual shock itself. So, all right, now that we got that done, let's move on to the back side of the bike. All right, so we're on the back end of the bike. We're gonna go ahead and get the swing arm in place. We set the gaps with that tool that Paul offers with the bearings. So everything should line up perfectly. The distance and everything should allow the swing arm to slide right into the transmission. And then we'll set our, little clevis bushings in, our shaft through. One big thing Andy told me on this, just to kind of help for any type of disassembling down the road and possibly the life of the bearings and stuff like that, just make sure we anti-seize this real well. One big takeaway from all of this, make sure whatever you do, you have everything kind of set before you start putting your swing arm on. What that means is you have a wiring harness. This obviously goes to our clutch switch. That's our oil pressure switch. I believe this is our starter solenoid switch. Make sure this harness is on top of the transmission. Make sure your brake line, now this is if your bike is assembled to the point mine is, but you want to make sure your brake caliper is above the swing arm. That's kind of why I tied it up here. I don't want to have it down low. I put the swing arm on and then I still have to break the line and put it on the top because I did it wrong, which I'm known to do. Either way, I'm going to spin the camera a little bit this way, let you guys kind of see what I'm doing when it comes to lining up the swing arm. We'll get the bolt in and we'll keep moving forward. All right, so like I said, hopefully this camera angle helps a little bit. But we're going to go ahead and get this swing arm kind of up in here. Kind of get this into its position. All right, so I got the hole kind of lined up. Wiggle it back and forth a little bit. So what's actually happening right now is the swing arm is making contact. It's lining up, but when it goes all the way down, it actually makes contact with my transmission, so it's not letting it fully get into the spot that it needs. So that should kind of help us line it up. Oh yeah, that thing is almost right there, perfect. Like I was saying, first things first is this little bushing that's got to go on here. And then I'll just use my hand, kind of pick the transmission up, kind of like I'm doing right there. But first we need to go ahead and get this thing nice and anti-seized. All right, pick this up, get that in there. Look on the other side, see kind of where it's at. All right, one thing I almost messed up on, before you get the swing arm on, you've got to route your belt. So if you're still running a belt drive on your motorcycle, you cannot get the swing arm on fully installed and everything without the belt. So I need to pull this thing off the transmission housing, get the belt on, and then I gotta slide it back on, and we'll get that pivot bolt back through. Back to where we were just at, bushing. Like I said before, make sure your dowel hole is towards the top. Make sure your pivot shaft itself has plenty of anti-seize on it. Now that we got through a second time, let's go ahead and get our pivot blocks back on. Like I was saying, these dowel pins, you can rotate this. The little dowel pin right here is not set directly above your top mounting bolt. It's off to just the side. You should be able to get it to catch. Get your bolts both to start top and bottom. There we go. Just get this run in. We're going to torque it down after they're already in. Now to the other side, do the same thing. Now when you're running these this other side in, because you're kind of bringing everything together, do a little bit at the top screw and a little bit at the bottom, and just keep going back and forth. You don't want to just run one down all the way. So that's how you're gonna run into problems. Also, you can kind of move the trans a little bit. Make sure it's sitting in there nice and flush. So now that we have the bolts in, it's obviously not torqued or anything, but you just want to make sure you don't have any binding. Look at that. Just falls like it should. Definitely a smooth operation. And everything's super tight. You don't need these. It's kind of fun working through this hole, huh? So this washer that goes on the nut side, I guess earlier FXRs, I could be mistaken, but I think there's a nut on both sides. On this one, it's a kind of a really long bolt. On the one side, because the shaft actually goes through the bushing a little bit, you have to use, there's one spot, if you look, that's flat, and then one that's kind of counterbore. The counterbore has got to go towards the swing arm because that pivot shaft's got to go through there. So the shaft does make its way through all the bushings, through the bearings, everything, and comes all the way through, protrudes just a little bit. So we're gonna get that on. I got a new kind of prevailing torque style nut. If you don't know what prevailing torque means, it's usually when a nut either has like a nylon inside of it or it's crushed slightly. So this one's kind of got like a slight crush, but it's still thin, just like the factory one that came out. We're gonna put this in. This is a 3/4 size nut. Get it to start. Just use this and run it down as far as I can. And then the book says to torque it between 40 to 45 foot-pounds. All right, there we go, 45. And then these things is calling for 20 to 25. Slowly. You're not gonna be able to run it all the way down. It does hit, but it goes to about that point. And then also side to side, make sure there's no side to side motion. Once everything's good like that, we'll just leave it down. This is my bare knuckle axle that I picked up from Paul, along with the front axle that we already installed. I'm gonna open this up and we're gonna temp install it right now because per the request of a few other guys, Joe Kidd, Joey Gorilla, you guys, I went with a 65 tooth rear sprocket, rear pulley actually. So that nice chrome cover and everything that I bought for my 70 tooth, I will no longer be needing. So I'm waiting on the chrome cover to show up for the 65. But we're gonna get this kind of temp installed. I'm gonna go ahead and get the brake and everything on there as well. Then we can go ahead and slide our axle adjusters back in on both sides. And then we're just gonna take our axle. I'm gonna run it this way because on the front one, this the nice head is on this side. I'll have the nut and everything on the other side. If you have like a long exhaust or something that's getting in the way, sometimes you can just switch it around. That way you only have to pull the nut off, get the axle out this way. You don't have to remove the whole exhaust. But my exhaust comes short, so it's not gonna be a big issue. All right. All right, got that back on there, got that on there. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get these shocks on. So let's grab the shocks, get all the hardware, and I'll show you kind of what we're gonna do there. Anyways, I think I mentioned it before. Picked these up from Bodywork by Ben. These are the 13.75 FXR specific shocks through Bitubo. Seems to be, like I said, a shock that a lot of guys run. Plus it's all chrome for not a lot of money. So these shocks will come in under 600 bucks for an all chrome shock, which is actually super incredible if you think about it. So Bitubo gives you a bunch of spacers and a bunch of different options. Unfortunately, everything for the top, well, I don't have one out. I put it, oh no, hold on. In my shock box, all I got was a bunch of these if I wanted something a little bit wider. This was gonna be too much because I have already mocked these shocks up on the bike. So Andy at Howland Cycles was able to mill me these down to this. And this is gonna be the perfect gap that I need for the top because you gotta figure once I have the chrome cover on there, then the shock will be off enough to line up with that. So I've already mocked that up. That was just something I did in the beginning. I'll run these down and then we'll torque them to 35 to 40. Now also on these, I got some of these stainless 3/4 nuts. So kind of like the prevailing torque bolt that I use for the shaft. I went ahead and got all new stuff because once you re-torque these a few times, they lose that torqueness of them. So these are fresh, brand new. Another reason why you don't need Loctite if you're using stuff like this. If you're using just standard bolts, I would highly suggest Loctite. But in this application, because I'm not using standard bolts, or nuts, I'm using nylon lock-in nuts. I should be able to get away with. And we'll do the same to the other side. All right, so there you have it. Tomorrow, the pulley cover comes in. We'll get the rear wheel back on. Real quick, the reason I went with the 65 tooth pulley, it's more highway friendly. So the 70 tooth obviously is larger. It's going to give you more takeoff, more acceleration. Obviously, like the stunt dudes, you know, they like the bigger pulleys. But when it comes to highway riding, I'm going to sacrifice some down low kind of torque and power, red light to red light, to have a little bit more on the top end. So it should decrease from what most guys are saying, 400 or 500 RPMs on the highway, which is going to be perfect because, like I said, I plan on riding this bike a lot. Any little bit helps. So that's why I went with the 65. I like the look of the 70. I think the bigger one looks better with the bigger holes. The 65, I'm not a fan of it at all. But if it makes the bike ride better, run better, at the end of the day, it should make it easier to travel. And I'm stoked. But so pretty much that's what we're looking at right there as far as the stance of the motorcycle. Obviously, I got to get the rear wheel on there, but it's going to sit nice and tall. I'm super hyped. There's a guy I follow on Instagram. I think his name is like FXR 1989 or something like that. He has a white one, and the stance on that bike is perfect, and that's kind of what I was mimicking. Also, Ashley with Unit 6. I sat on his bike at the FXR tour, and this is kind of the setup he has as well. Should be almost the same as his bike. So yeah, so we'll pick back up tomorrow. See you then. All right, what's up? Next day. So last night off camera, I did mock the wheel up just to make sure that what they were saying was true about the 65 tooth, because I heard a lot of people kind of on some FXR groups and whatnot say that you cannot run the 65 in the stock belt. Like I said, Joe Kidd, Joey, Barella, his brother, all them said you can run it. So I went with their advice. I bought the 65 tooth, mocked it up on the bike, and it actually did work. It's almost towards the very, very back of the swing arm, but there still is a little bit of adjustment. What I did do also is got the brake caliper disconnected from the mount, and I did go ahead and hook or kind of temp install my oil filter housing underneath the transmission. For those that don't know, on these early FXR EVOs, instead of having the oil filter to the front of the motor, it actually is up underneath here. They make kits that you can retrofit it, and I know like if you got the SNS mode or whatever, it puts a filter back in the front, I believe. I'm not 100% sure, but I just left it in the back. So it's all cleaned up, it's back there. What I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna go ahead and put the rear fender on. I was remembering back when I was taking the bike apart, the rear fender was a little tight to get off with the tire still in place. I'm just gonna mock it in there. So it's got a center bolt right here in the kind of back side of the frame. So there's one bolt that goes in this way, and then of course you have your strut bolts that have the little 9/16. That goes in. There's two additional bolts here and another bolt back here. I'm changing all this hardware to match this hardware here. So I'm just going to slide something in there for the time being just to hold the back end of it up. So let's get the fender in real quick, and then that way we can move on to the wheel. What I want to do first is I'm going to slide this thing up, and then I'm going to get it kind of in place, and I'm going to go ahead and get the center back bolt, whatever you want to call it, forward bolt, if you will. I'm going to get that in first, and then we can start messing with all the rest. This will definitely be easier with another set of hands. All right, so that caught. Now we'll just keep bringing this up until I can get these bolts in, which that looks like it right there. Put a little tape on there also because it was a very tight fit, and that way I'll know that it's not going to hit anything. And then like I said, I'm just going to use these bolts in the back just to kind of support it for the time being. Let's get these all the way through, so that way I know when I get the correct bolts that they're going to line up. So there's that, there's that. Everything's all nice and straight. We're going to go ahead and tighten up these. It's a 11/16 on one side. Let's lift this bike up some more. Lower back down. Just like with the front axle, we need to go ahead and put a little anti-seize on here. Kind of put it on there, and then also on the threads a little bit. On this side of the wheel, there's a spacer that goes inside the seal. It's the same on the other side, but then there's also an additional spacer on the other side. So just note that. All right, so right now I'm just kind of adjusting the wheel, like I said, get it kind of into a spot. I'm not going to get it into its final spot until it's on the ground and we can do everything properly, but we'll get it pretty close to where I want it. And that way, when I do make our adjustments on the bottom, we're not having to do a lot. Plus, we still got to set the transmission and the primary and all that stuff together. So right there is a good spot for it. Wheel still spins real nice and free, along with the belt. Everything's true. So let's get the brake caliper on and wrap this thing up. All right, I think that's going to wrap up this episode. We got the rear wheel on, we got the rear swing arm on, we got the transmission in, the shocks are on, the new 65 tooth rear pulley is on, brakes are on. One big thing to kind of show you guys too, in case you couldn't tell, one of the biggest reasons I went with the 65 tooth, or not just the RPMs on the highway, but look at how that wheel is set inside the fender. I mean, it is almost perfect. You know, it's about an inch further back, but it makes it, you know, centered with the fender. And I don't know if you've seen a lot of FXRs, but they do kind of, when you lift them, that front wheel or the rear wheel sinks forward and that thing sits perfect in there. So super happy with it. So I hope this episode kind of helps some of you guys that are at home doing your builds. I know I got a lot of you guys reaching out to me on Instagram. There's a lot of y'all that are kind of at the same point as I am, and we're kind of been sharing photos back and forth. And maybe when I wrap this bike up and y'all's bikes are wrapped up, I'm going to share some of y'all's photos on here if you don't mind. But I'm having fun. I'm learning. It's getting there. I got a friend of mine coming over tomorrow, Steven. We're going to get the motor set in, motor mounts, primary, hopefully the clutch and all that stuff back in. And then after that, it's really just, you know, gas tank, bars, risers, wiring, our Salomon seat. I still got to order brake lines, throttle cables. So yeah, I'm going to start measuring that stuff, get that stuff on order, and then we should be good to go. I think maybe firing it up on New Year's Day. What do you think? That'd be pretty awesome if I can kick off the New Year's riding this motorcycle. So we'll see. But either way, thank you guys for tagging along, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.